20 years ago today, the original Xbox was released in North America, and I figured what better way to celebrate said console than with a brief history of its most beloved game franchise. That, of course, we're talking about is Halo. Now, the history of Halo and Xbox are one and the same, given that the original Halo came out with the original Xbox on November 15th, 2001, and it became immediately apparent that this game would be the killer app for the system. Don't believe me? Ask IGN, it's on the box. So let's get started. Let's see what made Halo Combat Evolved so special. Despite being the first game in the series, Halo Combat Evolved actually sold worse than every other mainline game since then. This in part is due to the fact that the Xbox was relatively new at the time, also due to the fact that the graphics are not held up the best. However, considering this game was from 2001, if you look at other games from the era, these hold up a lot better than many of those other games. Halo Combat Evolved is credited for revolutionizing the video game industry, and particularly the first-person shooter industry. Previous first-person shooter games lacked the dual analog stick technology that Microsoft had utilized. Of course, Sony had its DualShock 1. However, many companies could not utilize that because the DualShock 1 was not exactly the universal controller for the PlayStation. Overall, Halo Combat Evolved is an exemplary shooter and won multiple awards for Game of the Year by companies such as IGN. However, there were certain shortcomings that made it not so fun at times, including repetitiveness, which I found personally to be an issue when it came to completing the game. Immediately following the release and a massive success of Halo Combat Evolved, it was clear to Bungie, the developer, that they needed more. This wasn't going to be enough. And so, of course, by November 9th, 2004, they gave us Halo 2, this time with no subtitle. Of course, because this was such a late game in the Xbox's lifespan, this game actually enabled online, so this wasn't the only disc to come out. Immediately following Halo 2, they released a multiplayer map pack, which of course is useless nowadays. However, if you're into this kind of thing, it's a cool little remnant of Halo's history. Now let's get into what made Halo 2 different, what made it better, and maybe the best in some people's opinion. As I had mentioned, Halo 2 was credited with being one of the best Halo games in the franchise. Most fanboys will argue that either the second or the third game comes out on top. One of the main reasons that people credit Halo 2 with being the best actually comes from its attention to detail. The developer, Bungie, had made sure that every model and every texture looked the best it possibly could. Thus, the 2004 game looked like it could actually have run on Xbox 360, much like Halo 3. Pair this with an excellent continuation of a story, multiplayer co-op in the campaign, as well as Xbox Live connectivity, and you had yourself one hell of a time. Bungie's gamble to make an entirely new experience rather than just copying off of the first Halo game paid off. While the first game only sold 5.5 million units, Halo 2 sold a whopping 8.46 million units. Impressive, given the Xbox 360 was just around the corner by that point. Halo 2's innovation overcame many of the problems that we saw with the first game. For instance, the repetitiveness of the first game was no longer an issue. Bungie was able to work around the limitations of the Xbox and create a truly stellar experience and a nice swan song to the original Xbox. By the mid-2000s, Microsoft released the Xbox 360, the console meant to succeed the Xbox, right here. Now, this was supposed to blow out the competition, and while it was doing a good job against Sony's PlayStation 3, there were multiple problems with the console, including the red ring of death and other technical difficulties. On top of this, there was no real killer game for people to justify such a purchase. But of course, on September 25th, 2007, Bungie answered our prayers and gave us Halo 3. Right there. This is considered by many to be the very best Halo game of them all. It is also supposed to be the end of a trilogy. In fact, if you read the back of the box here, it says the stunning conclusion to the Halo trilogy. Now, of course, given how long this video is going to be, it's pretty clear that that wasn't the case. But let's take a look into Bungie's last mainline game on the Xbox 360. One simply can't talk about Halo 3 without talking about the massive hype behind the launch of it. Hundreds of thousands of people lined up on launch day just to get their hands on this game. After all, it was Bungie's first and unfortunately last go at a mainline Halo game on next-gen hardware. Much like Halo 2, the effort they put into Halo 3 proved to be worth it. Halo 3 sold a whopping 14.5 million units, the most a Halo game has ever sold. Aside from the fact that this was a next-generation Halo game, much of the reason behind the hype came from the fact that Bungie had stated this would be the last in a trilogy of games. And Bungie made sure that you knew that as well. The soundtrack, the story, the backgrounds, everything about this game was supposed to be beautiful and epic. Halo 3 gained universal appraisal from game critics and fans alike, although ironically it has the worst IGN score of the three. The hype surrounding the game continued for multiple years after, and it truly seemed like the end of an era. To the dismay of gamers around the world, Bungie would never again make a mainline Halo game. However, they did leave us with a couple of surprises before they left for their next project, which ended up being Destiny. The first of which came on September 22nd, 2009, and this would be Halo 3 ODST, right here. Now this game is a bit different than the others, so I'm going to switch over to the game cam to explain it a little bit more in depth. Halo 3 ODST is a clear representation of Bungie's departure from the mainline series. For starters, you don't even play as Master Chief. You don't even really play as a Spartan. Instead, you take on a much more human role with human characters. Rather than being the badass that fights through any obstacle in your path, everything seems to be a threat to your safety. This can be seen, most likely in this footage, by the red glow that comes whenever you are shot or attacked to begin with. Almost like Call of Duty or the other shooters of that time, there is a much more realistic tone to Halo 3 ODST. It is not just a linear path of going to Covenant base after base to take out wave after wave of Covenant soldiers. Instead, you are tasked with much more human objectives, things that make more sense as a team rather than as an individual blasting his way through space. There is an emphasis when people talk about Halo 3 ODST on the open world aspect of the game. Of course, the path is still eventually linear. However, many people will agree that this feels, again, more like a game akin to Call of Duty or Battlefield due to the change in structure. Reception to this game is generally mixed. Some people believe that this break in formula was not good for the series and that it should remain an outlier. However, others found this to be a charming game in a series that may have needed a break from its roots. After 9 years of developing Halo games, Bungie's final release came on September 14th, 2010. This game, to many, would end up being a swan song to their legacy. To many, a contender for one of the greatest Halo games, if not games of all time. Of course, I'm talking about Halo Reach. Now, Halo Reach is actually a prequel to the main Halo series as opposed to ODST. And it is one of the few games where you don't play as Master Chief, nor is Master Chief mentioned. Of course, I will cue to gameplay to show you some of the differences and what made this game so special to so many. In a way, Halo Reach copied Halo 3 ODST. Once again, there was a much more human approach to the game itself. Set before the first game, you already know exactly what is going to happen. Reach is going to fall to the Covenant, but it is your job to live out the last days of Reach. Many people credit the story with being the best factor about this game, and I'm inclined to agree. Much like any other game before, you have to watch your own crew die off as you guys desperately defend the planet from the imminent Covenant invasion. The game builds to one final standoff in which you cannot win. Certainly the most memorable part of this story is when you realize that there is no stopping the invasion, that even though you think you have what it takes to beat wave after wave of Covenant soldiers, you simply cannot do it. The game will not let you. Although beloved by critics and fans alike, Halo Reach remains the most depressing of the entries, especially due to this impossible final level. The heartbreaking ending of Halo Reach can be compared to the heartbreaking departure of Bungie from the Halo franchise. Although many people, myself included, believe that Microsoft has done a great job catering to the Halo fanbase since then, every gamer knows that there is no turning back now, and that there will be no other game like Halo Reach, no other franchise like the original trilogy that Bungie had built from scratch. Following the release of Halo Reach, Microsoft gained the rights to publish all Halo games going forwards. To many, this was a tragedy. However, Microsoft was determined to prove that they could carry the torch that Bungie had carried for all of these years. And so, on November 15th, 2011, exactly 10 years after the release of Halo Combat Evolved in the original Xbox, Microsoft re-released Halo Combat Evolved with Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary Edition. Clever name, right? This game included multiple different modes, included co-op play, I believe over System Link as well as a variety of improvements. The most significant being the upgrade from Xbox level to Xbox 360 level graphics. Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary does not get to claim very much as its own. Although it added game modes that the original Halo Combat Evolved did not have, it is the worst selling game on both the Xbox and Xbox 360. Of course, relative to other games, it sold decently well, with 2.43 million units being shipped. This isn't bad by any means, however, this is still only half of what Halo Combat Evolved sold. Part of this relative failure likely just comes from the fact that it's simply a souped-up version of the original. There's nothing new except for the graphics. Furthermore, the original Halo Combat Evolved was playable on Xbox 360, meaning anyone who already had an Xbox 360 and a copy of Halo Combat Evolved did not need this new version. Still, the graphical upgrade is undeniable, as it looks leagues better than the original Combat Evolved. Now, despite the fact that we have already discussed 4 different games on Xbox 360, Microsoft was not quite ready to throw in the towel yet. And so, on November 6, 2012, Microsoft released the last Halo game on Xbox 360, which would be, of course, Halo 4. This would be the next game in the mainline series, and was the first to have mixed reviews. Of course, given Microsoft had to continue off of a trilogy that was supposed to end, it became difficult for them to appease the hardcore gamers who expected there not to be any more to do with Master Chief. Naturally, this was never going to happen to begin with. Halo was far too profitable to just end after 3 games. However, the legacy of Halo 4 is still a very contested topic today. I myself find it quite enjoyable. In fact, it was the first Halo game I ever had the opportunity to play. The graphics, of course, are fantastic, and what you should expect of Microsoft, but why should I tell you that when I can show you? So here you are. Despite its stellar graphics for the time, Halo 4 did receive only mixed reviews from both critics and fans. However, this doesn't mean that the game itself was mediocre. This may have just been because it was Microsoft, not Bungie, who was now making this game. Halo 4 expanded on the story established in the previous 3 games. In particular, Microsoft wanted to focus on the relationship between Master Chief and Cortana, something they are still doing today with Halo Infinite. While it was clear that Microsoft was not going to let the Halo fandom die out, nor were they going to let the franchise fade into obscurity, it was also clear that Microsoft was not going to let the quality of the Halo franchise drop. Halo 4, despite the shift in developer, still sold 9.75 million units, which made it the second best-selling Halo game in the main series, the third best overall. Microsoft's goal and their mission was clear, that Halo was here to stay. By the time of the Xbox One's release in 2013, Microsoft had made it quite apparent that they were not going to stop producing mainline Halo games. And with the 5th game in the works, they had to appease their audience. Thus, they made a remake of every single Halo game since, known now as the Master Chief Collection. Now, this included almost every single game prior. I believe it was Halo Combat Evolved, of course the Anniversary Edition, Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo 3 ODST, Halo Reach, and Halo 4. So, in essence, you could play every single Halo game up to that point on one disc. This released on November 11th, 2014 on the Xbox One, and later released on PC as well. The Master Chief Collection was meant to be an immediate success in the hopes to keep fans busy while preparing for Halo 5. Instead, hordes of fans were left dissatisfied with the lack of quality in these ports. Poor performance, on top of multiple games that were promised being missing from the initial release, meant that Halo the Master Chief Collection was immediately given a poor reputation. However, after years of updates and ports to PC, Halo the Master Chief Collection has been given a much more fitting legacy. One thing often not talked about with the Master Chief Collection is the Anniversary Edition of Halo 2. This version of the second game revamped the graphics to be in line with that of the Xbox One. This version of the game, as far as I can tell, is exclusive to the Master Chief Collection. Microsoft also hoped to revitalize the online scene within these first 4 main games. Of course, the initial Halo Combat Evolved did not have online support. However, this version added it, which was never seen before, not even in the Anniversary Edition. In this regard, Microsoft's hopes succeeded wildly, as there are millions of players still online today. There is a dark side to this legacy. Microsoft is now using the Master Chief Collection to justify shutting down the Xbox 360 servers for Halo. However, with the Master Chief Collection being widely available through Game Pass on both Xbox and PC, it's unlikely that fans will see any repercussions for this for many years to come. As mentioned earlier, Halo 5 had been announced and was in development. At this point, it was a matter of time until it was released. And luckily for Halo fans, on October 27th, 2015, Halo 5 was finally released. However, it did not get the praise from companies or from the audience that Microsoft was hoping. In fact, many today still consider this the worst game in the entire franchise. Let's look as to why. That's not to say that the game sold poorly, or even that the quality was bad. On the contrary, Halo 5 Guardians is one of the best-selling Halo games of all time, with 9.5 million units being sold. Furthermore, it's clear that Microsoft did put a decent amount of effort into the game itself. However, this is just not the game that Halo fans wanted. Part of the dissatisfaction of the fans seems to come from the fact that this game borrowed way too heavily from other modern shooters. Heavy critics of Halo 5 seem to think that this is no different than any other game they could play, such as Call of Duty or Battlefield, except with a sci-fi theme. In other words, the charm that had made Halo Halo was gone. Pair this with the terrible launch of the Xbox One, as well as the inclusion of a Battle Pass system, and you could understand why fans were so upset. Much like the Master Chief Collection, Microsoft did actually patch out many of the issues that fans had with the game. However, it was inevitable that Halo 5 would go down as the worst unofficial game in Halo history. For many, this would be the end of the list and of the history of Halo. However, I wanted to dedicate myself to cover every single Halo game, which includes the spin-offs, of which there are 2 major spin-offs. Of course, we're not going to count mobile games because those are far too many. I could not cover all of them in good enough detail in this video. However, we will get into the 2 spin-off games that Microsoft had created, both of which are grand strategy games, hence why I wanted to cover them, given I do a lot of grand strategy on this channel. The first of which was released in February 26, 2009. This would be known as Halo Wars. A lot of people I know never have heard of this series, and if they have, they know it as the one that's not a first-person shooter, so the one that they're not really interested in. However, it gave gamers the opportunity to try their beloved Halo story in a different kind of format, something that had never been done before. It has always been in the first-person genre, except for these 2 games. Because of this, it's a little complicated to learn. Of course, I haven't opened them prior to this video, so the gameplay you're about to see is going to be my very first time playing either of these games. Let's get right into it. As a spin-off series, Halo Wars is still relatively unknown to the general public. The first time I saw Halo Wars sitting on a store shelf, I assumed it was another game like Halo 3 ODST or Halo Reach. Instead, what we find is a grand strategy game. For those of you who don't know what a grand strategy game is, that's okay, because it can encompass a large number of games. Map games like Hearts of Iron 4, which I play a lot on this channel, Victoria, even a game such as Sid Meier's Civilization will end up being on the grand strategy games list. However, the games we're looking at, in similarity to Halo Wars, tend to be games like Total War or Company of Heroes, where instead of commanding hundreds of battalions at once, you command a few in order to win a small strategic victory. As you can see in the footage, it is nothing like a first-person shooter game, hence why a lot of people skipped these entries in the series. Even still, this didn't stop the game from moving lots of copies. Halo Wars is known to have sold 2.62 million copies, and for a spin-off game, that's pretty impressive. Halo Wars was also ported to Xbox One and PC, where it would sell another 500,000 units. This is the version that you are in fact watching right now, due to the fact that it is really hard to record the original on Xbox 360, especially in comparison to streaming it on the PC. Microsoft would release one last game on the Xbox One until Halo Infinite, which hasn't yet released as of the making of this video. Of course, the multiplayer is here, but the campaign is not, so I'm not going to count that as a full game yet. However, on February 21st, 2017, the most recent game in the series, Microsoft released a sequel to Halo Wars, known very cleverly as Halo Wars 2. Of course, the gameplay was still in the form of a grand strategy game, hence why a lot of people either did not know about this game or skipped it when the release day came. Let's take a look at Halo Wars 2. The resemblance to Halo Wars 1 is immediately apparent. Of course, why shouldn't be? It is a direct sequel to the game after all. However, Halo Wars 2 seems to take a much different approach than the original game. There is one reason for this, and I will say it right here and now: mobile games. From what I can tell, and I can't tell you everything because I only just learned about these games a couple months ago, but I have learned so much about these games in the past couple days, and it seems as if the second one relies heavily on the mechanics used in mobile games. Among the footage I recorded, I will include me building a base as well as multiple other parts to the base which help me gain resources. This is not only a trait of multiple grand strategy games, but also of mobile games. The difference between Halo and these mobile games is the fact that you don't need to purchase with real money these resources that you will find in-game. In this regard, it is very similar to a traditional grand strategy game. This game, being 8 years older than the first entry, clearly shows that it has matured and has expanded upon its original idea. I don't think it would be fair in the slightest if I didn't give credit to these mobile games. Whether we like it or not, mobile games in particular have shaped strategy games in a way that we would have never predicted before the introduction of the mobile phone. But if there is a series that can highlight the best parts about these grand strategy games, I think that you should definitely give Halo Wars and Halo Wars 2 a spin. If you've been watching this all the way through, or if you just skipped and happened to land on this part, I want to thank you guys for watching this whole video. It took a shitload of time to put together, and given I'm a college student, I had to do this all in a day, so this is going to drain what little energy I have left. If you did enjoy the video, I would appreciate it if you liked it. That will boost it on the algorithm. If you are new, it would mean a great deal to me if you would consider subscribing or at least checking out my other videos before you do. If you're returning, thank you again for watching through the entire thing. I hope that this video does well and that people are hoping to see more of this. I was hoping to do more of this. I just need the quality and the time to edit it. So thank you for watching, and thank you for waiting it out. I know I said I was going to try and get this done previously on the 15th, but that just couldn't work. So thank you for dealing with the delay. I will see you guys in the next video. Until next time.